Okay. Maybe because I can't really see the chat, if there's something not working or you want to intervene, I think it's better if you actually unmute yourself, or yeah, just say something, because I can't really see like the chat while I'm doing the presentation, I think. So yeah, okay. Okay. So, dissociative methods of sounds in performance. In 1803, shortly after the widespread of electricity on a mainstream commercial scale, Giovanni Aldini, an Italian physicist, performs his famously grotesque experiment to an audience. The experiment consisted in applying electricity to human limbs of dead people. The contact of the electricity on human flesh would magically make the dead person's eyes and mouths open and shut, and muscles move with spasms. The, at the time, still very unknown nature of electricity would have the power to magically move the dead back to life. In 1896, the premiere of the Lumiere brothers' film Arrival of a Train at La Ciotat Station takes place. The short film portrayed a train moving in the direction of the camera arriving at the station, as you can see here. It's really short. It provoked fear and panic at the theater, making many people leave the room fearing to be hit by a train. The so-called Pepper's ghost illusion, which is what you can see here in these illustrations, was popularized as a performance technique in 1862 by John Henry Pepper. The illusion is created through the usage of light reflection at the right angle. As you can see in the picture, light is projected on a person dressed as a ghost hidden under the stage, and the light reflected from this person travels over to a thin and less perceivable glass sheet, which creates a hologram figure behind it. So yeah, you can see here like two illustrations and like a small explanation of the physical phenomena of the reflection. And maybe this sounds similar to you. It is exactly the same technique that was used in 2012 when Tupac kind of came back from the dead and was performing with Snoop Dogg. And so yeah, it's exactly the same thing, just a bit more with other means like, wait, I can't really, sorry. Whatever, sorry, I hope everything's okay. So yeah, just a little bit more polished, more modern. And I think instead of a glass sheet, they used like a foil, a very like thin, transparent foil that was like completely unperceivable. I remember this event being like, people were like, wow, it looks so real, and everyone was shook. In the late 19th, early 20th century, as photography became more and more popular and present through its commercialization, the associations around it would be highly connected to the uncanny and the unexplainable, to ghosts and spirits. The divine and mystical fascination with photography quickly became as prominent as its scientific use. And spirit photography was born, which is what you can see here. Some examples of photographs taken in this period of time. Spirit photography sought to bring back the image of dead people by means of the camera and the photographic plates. The new media of photography was also a medium used in seances conducted between the material and the immaterial realms, a juxtaposition of the real with the unreal, the living person with their dead relatives. This is also so this practice also became very popular like after the First World War, because yeah, a lot of people died in war. So yeah, families would just go to spirit photographers to have contact with their dead relatives and have these photos. And I mean, people like really thought or like believed that they were having contact through this like the camera with their dead relatives. The possibility of doubling a person's appearance, regardless of which person, the dead person, but also a living person, was thought to be uncanny. It created a ghost-like figure that would be perceived yet unsettlingly intangible. The visual replication of something as absolute and essential as an individual person generated an ontological crisis. Wait, is there something? I can't see the chat. Yeah, the Tupac performance. Yeah, I remember. I was like, this is crazy. Yeah. Moving on. Sorry, now I can see the chat. So yeah, it was almost as if the camera would ensnare part of the subject's soul on the plates, and people were like really scared to be photographed because they would kind of be closer to death. And there's even this like analogy of the soul as like an onion that has like different layers. And when a person would be photographed, like one of those layers would be taken out. So you would be like killed a little bit because the photo would like take a little bit of your soul. The mysterious spectral qualities of the reproducible static image, just as we saw also with the moving image, with the train movie, lie in their split existence as captures of divine appearance and as mechanism of manipulation and deception. In other words, magic. Okay. I can't, sorry about the technical, I just can't find, okay. So one of the most famous and successful spirit photographers, so the actual photographers who revealed the films and organized these sessions with the people, was called Edouard Isidore Bouguer. And he became a real sensation among spiritualists in the late 1800s. Eventually, the police would confiscate his material and conclude that his plates had pre-exposed images on them and that he had like costumes and puppets in a studio. And through these things, he would kind of do like a Photoshop, like a early age Photoshop with these photographs. So eventually, he went to jail for 1 year for his declared fraudulent work. And the interesting thing in this case is that he actually confessed that his work was a fraud. And still, many people were not convinced about it and insisted that the photos were genuine captures of spirits and of their dead relatives. 3 other important figures in this kind of time, like spiritualism, but also this kind of like connected to these new technologies and photography, were the Fox sisters. And they were actually like not voluntarily, but they kind of triggered, they like provoked the beginning of these like spiritualist movements that were taking place in Europe and the US. So because the 2 youngest sisters were said to be able to have contact with ghosts and spirits. So whenever they were, you know, like in a kind of a place that had like a tragic story, or someone who had a dead relative, when these 2 young girls were there, people would hear sounds of like steps and like things moving, and so as if like the person, like someone was there. And hundreds of people witnessed to have heard these things and that they were really in the presence of spirits. The Fox sisters became so famous that they ended up performing in seances and theaters for hundreds of people, becoming internationally famous mediums. Later on, after they had gained a lot of fame, one day, one of the Fox sisters made a speech in a theater claiming that all they did was a lie and exposing the trick that they had used to deceive the audience. So it was like this room full of like a lot of members and followers of this movement, and they were just like, no, this was all a lie. We don't want to have anything to do with this movement anymore. And they literally explained the trick, like how they did that. And as with Bouguer, with Edouard Bouguer, the same thing happened. Still, most of their followers did not believe it was fake. Everything they had heard and felt was a real communication with spirits, and not even the testimony of the Fox sisters themselves could change that. So we can see in Bouguer and with the Fox sisters, clearly very interesting cases of collective reality questioning that I think are worth exploring when talking about performance. There is this persistent will to believe and a mysterious atmosphere that is shaping reality and making people question the most fundamental assumptions about life, death, and the material and immaterial. So moving on to more recent times. I don't know if you remember this, this dress. So this picture went completely viral in 2015 because people were completely split about yeah, I also see white and gold now. But I mean, for those who don't know, so this video, this photo, like had like two different groups of people, or formed two different groups of people. The first one would say that this dress is black and blue, and the other one would say this dress is yellow and gold. And people were going crazy because like they could not understand, they could not figure out like, how can you see that? And how do I see these colors now and these colors after, and so on. And actually, I mean, I don't know, like if actually at the time there were like explanations, but I mean, if you read now in the internet, you can read about some like explanations about the like this phenomena. But the thing is that I don't think people were actually interested in like why this was happening. And there's explanations that like it was about the exposure of the photo, or the different kinds of screens that the photo was being like emitted from, or you know, the lights around when you like see the photo. But people, I don't think they were very interested in that. They were more like really in this feeling of like, whoa, like we have like different perceptions of this thing, what's going on. This is a video of a TV show in Honduras broadcasted in 2015. It also became really famous. Suddenly something happens on screen on like a live TV show that becomes unsettling for everyone. So as the presenters are talking, suddenly a glass on the table just moves. Let's see.
Chiste nos dicen por acá, aquí prohibida la pólvora, ¡ah! Todo el mundo revienta cohetes.
Mira, mira. ¿Viste?
Así es.
¿Viste el vaso que corrió para allá?
Ok.
No sé si lo vieron.
Ah, te molesta.
Pero no hay desnivel.
No me preocupe.
No hay desnivel.
6 con...
No hay desnivel en la mesa.
6 con 58 minutos, vamos a Sophie's Cake. Vamos. La pólvora, ¡ah! Todo el mundo revienta cohetes.
Mira.
Yeah. So in 2020, this video of the Pope also goes absolutely viral. Maybe this is really recent, maybe you remember. People were like scared and confused because the Pope is on the balcony and then suddenly he just disappears like a digitally textured ghost. So.
It just disappears.
It goes bye-bye.
Also juggling taking care of their children. Dude, is it not? He's gone.
Oh my.
yeah. Also in 2020, another video becomes really popular. In Peru, there were about 200 people gathered on a beach, seeing a very bright light floating in the sky. And it's like, like when I say bright, it's like really strong. And people would point their lasers towards the objects, and the lasers would like hit a surface because you could see a point. So it was like hitting something, you know? And the light was apparently too high to be on the water. And people really said it was an UFO or something like that.
Grabado, está grabado.
Estamos
Se nota,
de nuevo,
se notó el borde del cerro. Ahí está.
Está en el aire. Miren, mira eso. No está en el cerro.
Anthony,
está en el
girando
aire.
esa luz.
Es un objeto que está en el aire, señoras y señores. Qué importante que las cámaras de Capital TV están en este momento siendo vamos a ver. Es impresionante, señores. Este es un hecho sin precedentes en la historia de los medios de comunicación, que delante de cientos de personas en este momento hay un objeto que está flotando en el aire, no está posado en el cerro. ¿Dos luces? A ver.
Sí, Yuri. Mira, se convierte en dos luces. Está en una luz, después titila como dos luces paralelas, después hace una forma de reloj, o sea, un punto con varios puntitos alrededor, y después hay un destello, es una secuencia.
Estamos transmitiendo, queridos amigos, un avistamiento ovni impresionante.
Yeah. So whatever explanations might exist for these phenomena, I am not interested in the question of truth, or at least I'm not interested in the question of absolute truth. Like, I don't care if this is spirits, if this is a UFO, if this is a conspiracy. This is not what is like interesting for me. I'm interested in the way people double question truth. I'm interested in how certain phenomena make people unsettled. And also, I'm interested in the way that these phenomena are so simple. They're very like physical phenomena that you could not, like, you have to experience them. You could not believe them or like fully understand them if they would be described to you. Like, I mean, you can see them in a video or like a photo, but if I would describe them to you, it wouldn't be the same thing. They're like very physical, like, yeah. So you really have to like experience them in order to enter this like realm of uncanny reality questioning. And the ability of these simple events to change people's minds about such fundamental things is what really interests me for this presentation. Yeah, many of these things are also somehow related to technology or the use of new media. I don't know if you remember these as well. They were also like a thing. These like chain messages, either on SMS or email. I honestly don't remember anymore if I believed these curses or not. But I mean, someone did, I guess, because they were circulating around so much. So someone probably believed that you would have bad luck or something would happen if you don't send the message to 10 people or something like that. And there was, I mean, this is like my opinion, but I think, yeah, there was definitely a thing with this like unknown material nature of messaging and emailing that was connected to the uncanny. And so this brings me to the idea that, like, although we live in an era of historical abundance when it comes to technologies and visual input, yeah, same. Like, I mean, I also was like super young when I got those, and yeah, if you're like young, you definitely get a bit like creeped out by these things. Yeah. Wait, sorry. Yeah. So even though there is a lot of like new technologies and visual input, maybe we have inherited from like we have in a similar way of like 19th 20th century, this kind of like emotional reaction to these things. And despite our incessant craving for new technology, we seem to as yet be incapable of emancipating ourselves from the fear of it, or maybe not the fear of the technology itself anymore, but of the possibilities that can come to the world, or like how the world can change through them, in the most like radical way possible. So this is another really interesting case. In 1938, Orson Welles performed an audio play of The War of the Worlds on a live radio. His performance was apparently so realistic that people thought that the Earth was indeed being invaded by aliens and started to freak out. Like people were literally like packing and like making a plan because something was going to happen, and like these aliens were coming and blah blah blah. Yeah, so that's pretty interesting. Now moving over to magicians and magic performance. So a little disclaimer here, or a little thing that I want to add just in the beginning. Even though I'm indeed talking about magicians to reflect on the nature of performance and performing arts, I do think that the whole thing around magicians that has been historically constructed, especially after the Enlightenment, is very problematic. I really dislike it in a way. Like, I find it weird. In the end, because in the end, magic performance was so much of a celebration of the mostly white masculine power to control the physical properties of nature and physical reality. Also, the amount of misogyny, racism, and transphobia connected to, I guess, like mostly European magic performance is not overseeable. And I think this is something that we should not leave unaddressed. Also, another thing is that which is, I find it like really bad as well, like, or sad in a way, is that there has been this like historical opposition that was constructed between like magicians and witches, and like magicians and mediums. And magicians would be like connected to the ability of reproducing the impossible, but not actually either playing around with like the laws of like nature and like physics, and chemistry and blah blah blah, or like selling something that was fake to people and like sell a fraud to people. So witches were dangerous, and magicians were like connected to science, and magicians were like entertainers, and mediums were like fraudulent and dangerous delusional people. So, and these are separations that become much stronger after the Enlightenment, when magicians become more connected to the established Western science, and then later after the Industrial Revolution, when they also start using like new technologies and like machines for their performances. Also, another thing that I find really weird about magic performance, and I guess this is all connected to the historical development of performance and like the social and like political realities of like society. And so also like another really weird thing is that in the late 19th century, there was a very drastic change in the kind of aesthetic behind magic performance. There was this famous magician called Jean-Eugène Robert Houdin that creates this new kind of aesthetical environment within magic performance. Before him, the kinds of costumes that would be used, or would be more free, like experimental, more maybe also like more extravagant, And also magic was mostly performed on the street. It was like a street performance thing. And then this guy comes and he starts to popularize this aesthetic that we know nowadays of like the elegant, rich-looking outfits. As you can see, actually here, there's a drawing of him. It's like on the left, bottom left corner, where he's like on stage. So this kind of aesthetic, this like suits and gloves. I mean, he doesn't have gloves there, but you know, this like hats and so he popularizes this kind of aesthetic, and magic performance becomes then this like activity connected to like elegance and fanciness, and is mostly performed in theaters that were affordable only by rich people. So for me, like historically, and I even like nowadays, it's very much, I think it does have a lot that vibe. It becomes really an embodiment of a kind of performance connected to power and the satisfaction to like control. And yeah, I don't know. I think there's definitely a lot to like criticize about it. And also like this aesthetic, I think is just, I don't like it. I think it's a bit ugly. And I refer to magic performance here because it is probably the only kind of performance that has played with this idea of reality questioning on a deeper level. And unfortunately, the political forces and social hierarchies were very much influential in its aesthetical and conceptual developments. It is, however, in some of its techniques, been a kind of inspiration for me, like as like in thinking about performance, and that's why I'm bringing it up. So this idea of exploring the physical space with the body, but in a way that is playing with the expected physical behaviors, is kind of my idea in performance. I don't really want to achieve anything like visually or like aesthetically similar to magicians, but it definitely makes me think about like when I develop and when I create a performance, the playfulness, the experimentation, the moments of surprise, and all of it taken to this very material level. It doesn't really matter like on like the first level, like what you're telling, it matters how. And for me, like creating a performance also is also about creating something that like people want to look at, and because they want to, they have like they like to look at it, they like to see it, just in the same way that when you see like a painting or a sculpture or anything, you look at it and you're like, nice, like you have like this pleasure of looking at it because you know it's nice. And in the same way, but like in the sense of like the kind of like physical and chemical properties of like a space and of like a body, and a body is an object also in space, if that makes sense. So not only about the content, which is also very important in performances, but also about the mere physical behaviors of things that are present on stage. So these are some videos of like, yeah, like cool stuff that just is very like connected to science, but also like there is something very similar to like what like magicians would do, how they would like use objects in the space and the way that we are perceiving everything. And this is why for me it is so important to create more performance art that is coming from a less conceptual and a more perceptual focus. The body as a living physical thing that perceives and is perceived is so much more than the ideas it supposedly represents. Also, it is so much more than this human meaning that is also projected on it. It is a molecular physical body in space. And in one way or another, it is not different from like chemicals or objects or substances. So performance is for me more than the presence of the body and like this focus on the artist. It should also be about the presence of a perception apparatus with an extended focus on the audience. So here I have this quote by Ursula K. Le Guin from The Left Hand of Darkness. This is from the introduction. Unfortunately, like these things from Zoom are like covering it, so I'm just gonna put this a bit smaller for 1 second. So this is referring to science fiction and to books specifically, but maybe we can also think about this in like performance, in the sense of like performance. In reading a novel, any novel, we have to know perfectly well that the whole thing is nonsense. And then while reading, believe every word of it. And then she says, words can be used paradoxically because they have, along with semiotic usage, a symbolic or metaphoric usage. And then this part comes in brackets, but I think is the most important one. They also have a sound effect that linguistic positivists take no interest in. A sentence or a paragraph is like a chords or harmonic sequence in music. Its meaning may be more clearly understood by the attentive ear even though it is read in silence, than by the attentive intellect. Words are so much more than their supposed meaning. They're also symbols, they're sounds, and these are elements, parts of words that are worth exploring in the reading experience. In this case, transferring that to performance would mean bodies and physical objects can be perceived in so many different ways and endless ways, truly. And in performance, it is worth exploring these ways that go beyond conceptual, intellectual meaning, but also are related to the physical and chemical conditions of how a body is in space in its most molecular and material dimension. So, wait, I'm gonna put this back to, maybe this can go here. So, and now like going again to like performance, you still cannot see because, or maybe you can, I'm not sure. So I'm just gonna do this again. So performance art has a history of kind of deriving from painting. The movements that started performance art as a new branch of art in the 60s and 70s really created this narration that art has to become more historical. What does it mean? This thing, performance is coming from painting, art has to become more historical. That means less centralized in the object of the frame. So it does come from the idea that there is a gradual evolution of art that becomes more and more outside of the two-dimensional frame and becomes more and more part of historical happenings of the world, and not only part of this like object that is like this like centralized object, and also this thing that is like so much around the artist and the gallery. So okay, so these are definitely not in chronological order. This is not about, it's just some examples, like some pictures. So this idea is basically like, so you have painting, and this is definitely not also like a chronological development of art or anything. It's a more like kind of like scheme to talk about performance, like what is performance as like a form of art. So you have painting, which is this very like two-dimensional thing. It's framed and, you know, it's just there on the canvas. Then going a bit more outside of the frame is a collage, which is still pretty much two-dimensional, but it's actually two layers. And also the things that are there are like from like different like sources, like they're not just like in the painting, like you put everything there and that's it. So there is something already going a bit outside of like this two-dimensionality and the frame. Then we move over to assemblage, which is basically the same thing of a collage, but with three-dimensional objects, as maybe you can see there, with like, yeah, objects or like materials that are really like, make this like relief, like more three-dimensional thing. Then we move on to sculpture, which is like, yeah, like it's not on the frame anymore. It's three-dimensional. You can perceive it from like different sides, and it is like in a space, you know, but it is still an object. It is still an object. Then we move over to an environment. So there is still this thing that you are seeing. Maybe it's not an object anymore, but it's a kind of like extended object. It's maybe, yeah, it's not like framed. You could not like perceive it as like a object that starts here and ends here, but somehow it is in a way still framed by the gallery or like by the space. But instead of like seeing from the outside, the audience is like inside and is part of like the environment. It's like part of the environment, or the piece itself is like the experience of the audience. And then from there we move to performance, which becomes just not anymore about an object, not anymore necessarily about like a visual thing that you can see, or you know, like a thing that you are like experiencing like that. It becomes more about actions and about this idea that like as long as something is declared a performance, that's a performance. And so it becomes very conceptual in this way, because yeah, it becomes kind of like part of history, and it's something that happens in that place, in that time, and everything, it just becomes part of life in a way, if that makes sense. So as we gradually move from painting to performance, we move away from the frame. And as we move away from the frame, we also move away from the materials involved in producing a piece of art, in producing an object, because art has become part of life and the world. So as it moves away from the frame, from painting to performance, it acquires a more historical nature, but it loses more of this like material elements that is needed to create an object in space. In performance, art is just what exists, and like the mirror can be just like people in a space, or just like an object in a space, as long as it is like declared to be that. So in one way or another, in one way or another, even though, I mean, as you can see, for example, here in these examples, there is still some material and aesthetical importance. It does move more to a conceptual realm of interpretation. So, okay, long thing. So as it is moving away from painting, it is also taking from painting certain attributes, kind of like a vector, you know, because like when you're like, so yeah, when you're like running away from something, from the format of something, or you also kind of take that thing you're running away from with you, because that's like your starting point. So so the kind of founders of like performance wanted to like move away from this like static thing, but by moving away from that in this like evolution, they still like take certain attributes of it. And my interest in performance is to kind of rethink this route as something that might also be influenced by film and the digital realm, and by their aesthetical attributes. if that makes sense. Yeah, so so with all of this, sound has a fundamental role for me in a way that I design and think of performances, and yeah, in a way that is like more focused on perception and the whole environment of the performance itself. For me, sound always comes first. It is through sound that I actually get the ideas first. And when I compose or write a performance, I usually always start with the music and then elaborate on the choreography or the physical narrative of it. Also, sound is symbolically associated with an act of creation because it is the effect of two things like touching each other or like clashing. Also, sound is so interesting for me because it does have something ghostly in the sense that we cannot detect it so simply like we detect something visually. But maybe, yeah, maybe I'm also wrong about that. Finally, sound is, for me, also a source of endless meanings that can be put in context. And be it in the way that it is produced or perceived, it is always in relation to something. So, okay, so I really find this quote interesting. It's by Aristotle from the book De Anima, which means the soul. It's literally a book about the soul. It's a bit old, ancient Greece, but still, I think it's interesting what he's saying here. So there's it's like this book about the soul, and then in the second book, he describes the senses, and then in this 8th chapter, he talks about sound and hearing, and he says, actual sound is always of something in relation to something and in something. For this reason, it is impossible for there to be sound when there is only one thing. Hence, the thing that makes the sound does so in relation to something. Is it the thing struck or the striker which makes the sound? Or is it indeed both, but in different ways? And then he goes, this part is a bit, it's interesting, it's weird. So much for our account of sound. Voice is a particular sound made by something with a soul. For nothing which does not have a soul has a voice. Interesting. Just a little input. So for me, what is important to keep in mind about sound is that it is always put in context. So if I play, for instance, a very hardcore metal music and then show a video of, let's say, very dirty and smoky room with teenagers in a basement, like in a basement concert, the effect achieved is very different from the one achieved if I play the same song and show a video of a cooking show, for example. I believe it is this very ghostly nature of sound that allows us to put it in so many different contexts and use it to manipulate the predominant emotional effect of image. And when I say image, I mean, can be on the screen, but also on stage. And so what I've been talking about in terms of like perception and magic performance and like these ways that we can experience performance in a way that is more related to the materiality of the show than to like the concepts behind it. So relating this to sounds, I want to give just now some like examples of ways in which sounds and image coexist that are challenging this maybe preconceived expectation of how they should be connected to each other. So these are like examples of things like how image and sound are like coexisting. Most of them are like from like a digital and like filmic perspective, but one of them is also just like in general life. But of course, I'm referring to them to like think about performance and think about sounds in performance. So the first one is Lipsync. So I have here two videos. The first one is just a normal show of like this artist who is doing lip sync, and the second one is like a compilation of lip sync fails.
É para amanhã, bem podias viver hoje, porque amanhã quem sabe se vais cá estar. Ai, tu bem sabes como a vida foge, mesmo de quem diz que está para adorar. Foi mal.
Tú mordiste la manzana y renunciaste al paraíso y condenaste a una serpiente siendo tú el que así lo quiso. Por milenios y milenios permaneces.
I saw them cameras flash, handprints and footprints on my glass, handprints in the prints all on my hand.
Daylight comes, girls they just wanna have some fun. Just need to free my mind, my mind.
Yeah, so as we can see in the first video, the power of illusion is so intense. And I mean, even if you would watch this video and not know that it's lip syncing, I mean, you would just think that he's singing, you know, but knowing that he's lip syncing, that changes completely the way that you're like perceiving the thing somehow. And also, I think it's just incredible. Like he's not singing actually. Yeah, it's also my favorite, the Katy Perry. Like so funny. Anyway, so yeah, so and like this power to like see how people are like, wow, incredible, and clapping and just having fun and like, wow, he's singing. And then about the second video, I really like this moment where the lip sync fails, like this glitch, you know, like there is a moment that changes everything in the way that we are perceiving the situation. And this radical shift of what is in front of us is something very interesting for me. Like how quickly suddenly you just like are perceiving something in a way that is very different. It's like very efficient somehow, or I don't know, just it's weird. So then we have dubbing. So yeah, this is an instance of like dubbing of Raven to Portuguese.
Vá! Vamos começar as gravações dentro de minutos, mas assim que ouvirem a campainha temos de parar e preparar-nos, está bem? No entanto, se houver alguém na plateia que tenha algum talento e que queira vir até aqui, quem sabe, estamos em Hollywood, podem ser descobertos.
Obrigada, muitíssimo obrigada, desculpem. Olá, o meu nome é Raven Baxter. Muito prazer em conhecer-vos. Eu quero cantar uma musiquinha que a minha mãe costumava cantar. Atirai o pau ao gato, mas o gato não morreu. Dona Chica mirou.
Yeah. So similar to playback, to lip sync, even though there is like a weird disconnection between the voice of a person and their lips, we still experience the whole thing and understand what's going on. But there is this like uncanny valley that somehow is present and makes things look a bit weird. I mean, just like if you would think about that in like real life, like, you know, like the words are coming in like it are not synchronized with the lips. Yeah, so then for me, also interesting to think about performance or like for performance and like sound and performance are the concepts that actually come from filmic language, from like cinema, of diegesis and non-diegesis. So like Diegesis. I should have written that down. But yeah, diegesis and non-diegesis. So diegesis is so you have diegetic sounds and you have non-diegetic sounds. And in a movie, diegetic sounds would be everything, all the sounds coming from the story. So from the characters, from the street, from the environment. And these are sounds that the characters themselves can hear because it is part of the story. And then you have non-diegetic sounds, which are sounds that appear in the movie, but they're not part of the story. They're like an input that is given by something outside of it that the characters cannot hear. And this is, for example, like music or a voiceover. Yeah, so let's see some examples.
No, girl.
Give me your fucking phone.
It was shut off. I had to cover your rent last month. I've been told you this was gonna happen. All men cheat. That's why they're called trade. Do them just as dirty as they do us. Out here, it is all about our hustle. And that's it.
Okay, so until this moment, what we're hearing is only diegetic sounds. We hear the two characters speaking, a bit of noise outside. We hear like how they're like touching the table, blah, blah, blah. This is all diegetic sounds. And then
what are you plotting? Merry fucking Christmas.
I love that movie so much. And then the second example is like more predominantly non-diegetic sounds. So, and the effect that is achieved is very different.
Patricia Kitten, aka Deep Throat, had penetrated the deepest recesses of the Republican sphincter. With her secret anti-terrorist spray, named after Gabrielle Coco Chanel's lucky number. Oh, but Lord, was she sick of that black. What is it with freedom fighters and couture anyway?
You've got view support, booster charge. What can I say? We've got here the pressure plate.
Stop, hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going now. Stop, hey, what's that sound?
Yeah, so these are just like ideas that are like used for filmic language or for film. And for me, like when I think about sound in performance, I try to like transfer that to performance, if that makes sense, or just like think about these different layers of how we see something in front of us and how we hear sound, and like transfer this like digitality or like this thing about films or about the digital to performance. Yeah, just okay, it's 6:30. Okay. Okay, actually the last thing I wanted to talk about as like a reference of like how I think about sounds in performance. It's actually my main reference, and it's yeah, in a general way, like my basic reference for how I think about performances. And it's music videos. in like a way or another, I do think about my performances as live music videos. And as I said before, I always start with the music, and I guess music videos do too. For me, it's a form of film that has so many endless options in terms of narrative, texture, and experience. And I remember, so this is the thing, like when I was young, I saw like the first music video ever, like in a store with like TVs, and then I was like so interested and like curious, and then I would spend like hours in front of like MTV and VH1 watching music video after music video. And I would be like, I remember thinking like, how do they sing underwater? How do they sing and move around so much? How is this possible? And like, I would be really like confused about this like material reality that was happening there. Because for me, these music videos were like, I mean, wouldn't have like the idea of like that they were like edited and there were like green screens and like special effects. For me, they were just like unedited things that were happening, and then someone was like filming them with a camera. And this idea of like performance as music videos has like stuck with me. And I would quicker categorize my performances as concerts than as like dance acts, even though performance is very connected to dance. So I don't know, I was thinking of like maybe like taking a look at some of these music videos and then like think a little bit about aspects like what are the narrations or the variety of narrations around them, and like why are these people singing to the camera or not singing to the camera, or like what is our role when we are like seeing this music video? Are we like in it? Are we outside? Is the person that is like singing to the camera like singing to us or not? Like there's a lot of questions, but maybe I don't know, it's also like they're just snippets, but maybe it's a bit too much, and I'm gonna just go through them really quick, like just so that we have like a general idea.
Chemistry is off the chain. It's perfect now, but will it change? This ain't a yes, this ain't a no. Just do your thing.
Yeah, so I mean, I could, as I said, like when I was a kid, like I could be watching like music videos for forever, and so yeah, like for me, like I don't know, like it doesn't. I think the interesting thing about music videos is that it doesn't really matter what's happening. It's just happening, and it's very convincing. And the need for like a consistency in terms of narrative is not so important, because everything just like looks good and feels good the way that it is, whatever these stories are, whatever these worlds are, whatever is happening, it makes sense. And also music is then the kind of like, I mean, it is, as I said before, the thing that comes first. So everything that is like physical is being oriented by the music. So so the music is like this thing that is like binding the meaning of everything, and I think that's quite cool. So also now I had like some examples of like my own performances. Maybe I'm just gonna skip that and then finish the presentation. Or I just show you, okay, like this one, for example, where I think maybe this thing that I have been talking about is a bit clear about this like sound. Oh yeah, I mean, okay, I can show a little bit, but also I know this was a bit long, and I hope this wasn't like too much information, and I would be also glad to just like talk a little bit more loosely. So I can show a little bit really quick and then wrap up the presentation. So let's see, of course this is video, so it's different. It's like, it's a bit meta what we're doing here, because it's about performances. So the effect is actually achieved in live formats, but yeah, so this is EmoBot.
Hello. Hi there. So nice to see you in this day of autumn. Let me introduce myself. I am EmoBot. EmoBot is my name. People know me as EmoBot. Endless intonation supposed to cause criticizable acts to bot. Hello. Hi there. In the way I am supposed to. It's hard to say such simple things when endless intonations give us endless meanings, and these give us endless but different and, unfortunately, mutually exclusive possibilities of navigation. If you don't choose anything, I'll automatically start to talk.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know, maybe I'm just gonna like skip a bit this part. I mean, yeah, this was a more like live ASMR thing. Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is like a live ASMR. I mean, you can also like check my work on like my website or Instagram, but just, okay, I'll just like talk about this one, and then I will finish, like say my last words. This is about like this idea. So I had like this laboratory. This was a durational performance, and for like 3 days, 5 hours every day. And then I would be like in this laboratory with these like random objects, and there would be like a microphone that would like amplify the sound, so people could like hear or see, or hear and see. And I tried to play a little bit with this like the expected way that like a certain object sounds, or the expected way that a certain object looks like. One example would be like, I remember like these chains, these metal chains, like underwater with like a super amplified microphone, would sound like super soft and like super, you know, and kind of like playing with this like yeah, okay, I mean yeah, I cannot really see anyone, but maybe you can write in the chat if you would prefer to have some more conversation now, or I mean, I don't have so much more, so maybe I can also just finish it. So yeah, and oh yeah, so yeah, I mean, then I have like two examples of like this is not really like sound related, but maybe this idea of like creating an environment. This is more like sci-fi, like with sci-fi elements, maybe not directly sound, but this idea of like trying to create an environment that really like puts you somewhere else, you know? Sorry, I should have said that that had strobe. I hope that was okay. And yeah, last one.
Beliefs are no longer serving you. You may be overthinking things, creating negative patterns, or limiting yourself by only considering the worst case scenario. The more you think about the situation.
Yeah, and so just the last words, just to kind of like wrap up the presentation, coming back to the beginning of the presentation, one central question in performance for me is, how can I make the physical properties in the space I perform in look more like unreal, or like challenge something there? How can I trigger some sort of reality questioning, and why after all? And the why is something that I will only elaborate now, I guess, shortly, but it also can lead to like a whole conversation. The nature of discrimination and the place of exclusion of marginalized bodies is part of a whole absurd cognitive system that we have been born into, which excludes us based strongly on a mere absurd and superficial optical cognitive process. Be it with racism, transphobia, or misogyny, these oppressive structures operate on this most absurd visual level. In cognitive capitalism, human immaterial cognitive assets like attention, taste, and impulse are capitalized upon for the profit of powerful corporations and alarmingly efficient modes of biopolitical control. More than ever, we are forced to critically double question our perceptual apparatuses and cognitive impulses, even in the most personal spaces. This time of extreme cognitive malleability needs concrete cognitive shifts, some of them that should have taken place long ago, others that bring us closer to an endangered individual cognitive autonomy. And I think especially on the cognitive shifts that we need to cultivate with it, I think specifically about the cognitive shifts that we need to cultivate within a collectivity in order to protect the most vulnerable marginalized bodies and destroy the structures that push them to the margins or outside of the meaning of humanity, of what it means to be a person, a human. And in performance, but not only, also in like the rest of life, focusing on the physical body is very important, but there are things tied to it that we do not see. And the way that certain bodies are kind of taken away from what it means to be human is not an explicit and blunt thing you would be able to visualize, rather something ghostly that fills the spaces we have forgotten and hides the things we take for granted. Perception itself is not an individual psychological thing. It is a set of conditions and lived moments that influence the way we experience something. Cognitive shifts of immaterial objects need immaterial intervention, which I believe sound is able to offer as an element of performance. I believe that the fundamental optical dimension of these oppressive structures can be challenged through the invisible nature of sound, which becomes this disentangling and binding mechanism of meaning. Sound is a tool that is able to destabilize the normative semantic associations that image brings with itself. With my work, I try to simulate new realities or to create reflections of our own through the development of alternative semiotics and perceptual playfulness in which sounds occupies a crucial role. Performance is more than the presence of the body and the focus on the artist. It should also be about the presence of perception apparatuses with an extended focus on the audience. Yeah, so that's all I gotta say. If you, oops, sorry, if you, thank you, first of all, and also if you want to do a screenshot of the sources, I'm going through them, or, you know, the references, but this will also be recorded, so I'm just going through them so that it's in the recording, people can see. Yeah, so, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who is here. I don't know who is here actually. Maybe I can see. Yeah, if there are any performances coming up. So this month was pretty full. And now I will have one in April on the 23rd for like here in Berlin. I still don't know. Yeah, the sources will be. I passed through them. I hope they are visible in the video. Yeah, so on the 23rd, I will have a performance of April, and then yeah, I mean, I do want to like perform in Lisbon, in my hometown, which like I only performed there once actually, which is kind of sad. Yeah, I think that's it for now, but I definitely am applying for like different things, but this last month was so full of stuff that I'm also trying to go easy on it. So yeah, I hope that was, wait, I'm gonna stop sharing the screen, and yeah, I mean, if you have any questions, I did not study performance. I studied philosophy and literature. I'm applying for art school this year, but I have a more like theoretical background. I don't know, I guess I came up with this idea by being, honestly, it all started with the emo bot, this performance that I showed you where I'm like lip syncing everything with like a pre-recorded voice. And yeah, and I started to just, because I mean, in general, like I started to do performance here in Berlin, but I never fully, yeah, like maybe sometimes I will perform Emobot again, but I already did it a bunch of times, so I'm a bit tired of it. But I don't know, like I never fully like saw myself inside the scene of performance, because it was mostly like connected to dance, or I don't know, I guess the kind of like the aesthetics of performance. I couldn't like identify so much with them, and I guess I always thought like I like perform, but I don't see myself here. But like, what do I like to perform, and what kind of aesthetics? What do I think that performance, like how can it develop or like be something else as well? And for me, the answer is in like the digital and the and film and all these new ways of perceiving like matter and perceiving like the things in front of us that we have now with like so much like digital presence, and kind of like transfer that to performance. And then also I am really interested in like ghosts and this like uncanny stuff, and also how that relates to technology. And yeah, I guess that's it. And thank you, Danny, for the questions, and thank you to everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Yeah. I also want to write the heart. Yeah, so I don't know. Just let me know what to do now. Okay, I think. Wait. I'm gonna leave, I guess. Okay. Well, thank you very much. It was a pleasure. I hope it was nice for you too, and bye.
Guys be like, black girls do too much. And we do. We do the most because we is the most popular, the most hated, the ones with the most booty, the most melanin. Call us mosty.
Yeah, nigga, the queen has returned. Make some noise for the unbothered mother of dragons. All her daughters breathe fire, nigga. Yeah, that's right. Misa, show them you not playing with these motherfuckers. Motherfuckers.